The recent tragic Montreal shootings of 2 police officers and a bystander have renewed calls for stricter gun control. But is this the answer to reduce gun violence, or are there potentially better solutions? Well, today's guest joins us from Vancouver, Rod Giltaca. He is the CEO and Executive Director for the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Good to have you with us, Rod.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
You bet. Now, this is, of course, a tragic situation all around in Montreal. There are reports that the firearm used was an SKS, and so there are now calls for the federal government to ban this type of rifle. And so do you want to just let our audience, first of all, know what do we know about the SKS rifle, Rod?
Well, the SKS is a very inexpensive, circa World War II semi-automatic rifle that has been available in Canada for quite some time. So Eastern Bloc countries had produced these things by the tens of millions, and then they quickly were rendered obsolete when the AK-47 was developed. So a lot of these ex-Soviet bloc countries had all of these rifles sitting there, and they ended up finding a home in the surplus market, in civilian markets that would allow them. And they are a fixed magazine, meaning they weren't designed to take detachable magazines. They're very inexpensive to shoot. They shoot a round called 7.62 by 39, which is available in huge numbers in surplus. And they're fairly reliable, though relatively inaccurate. But they found a home in hunting and target shooting, recreational shooting in Canada.
Okay, I mean, is this particular rifle any more dangerous than other rifles?
It most certainly is not. So this is not, there were no full auto SKSs. They're semi-automatic only. These are very similar to firearms that we've had for 100 years in Canada. So again, the choice of firearms is not alarming. The shooting could have been accomplished, especially given the circumstances, right? Close range. Could have been done with a pump action shotgun off the shelf in Canada. So certainly in this situation, the type of firearm had no bearing on the outcome.
Well, I guess the question that comes out of that too, I mean, if the SKS was in fact banned, as people are calling for, would it have stopped the shooter from committing the crimes?
Well, of course it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And no reasonable person would even suggest that. Obviously, the political landscape in Canada and in many other countries around the world is not reasonable. The conversation, the discourse is not reasonable or rational most of the time. In fact, I might venture to say. And it certainly isn't reasonable when it comes to situations like this. The overwhelming majority of firearm-related crime in Canada occurs with handguns that are smuggled across the border or illegally manufactured, some that are stolen from licensed gun owners. But of course, the gun owners are the victims of those crimes. But, firearm-related homicide with long guns, it doesn't happen that often in Canada per capita. And certainly this is not an indicator that, somehow these firearms, probably numbering somewhere around 800,000 to 1 million in private hands, should be banned. It's just not reasonable.
And what do stats tell us about the guns used in violent crime? You touched on it there, mainly handguns, it seems. And so are they usually legally acquired weapons? Probably not. Or are they, more likely illegal weapons smuggled in from the U.S.?
They are almost entirely illegally held firearms. And you can tell whether they are or not, because if you see a media story on a firearm-related homicide or some firearm-related violence, if they show the charges and you see unauthorized possession of a firearm, this was an unlicensed individual that got this firearm through illegal means. So again, I don't think I have to tell anyone that the political discourse, especially around the public safety file, is quite an irrational conversation. That's got a lot of people frustrated.
Well, yeah, the public safety, that's ultimately what it boils down to. We all want to see our public, safer, right? Sure we do, from both sides here. So now we've got some pretty strict regulations in Canada in place now. So to what degree has it reduced gun violence? Do we have some stats on that, Rod?
Well, it hasn't, which is the open embarrassment of the Liberal government. They've been putting 90% of their resources in pursuing licensed gun owners as opposed to repeat violent offenders and anyone else that's perpetrating firearm-related violence in Canada. And I would like to point out, we are the gun lobby in Canada. And I will tell you flat out that if the government was doing something that had some kind of even rational, much less demonstrable positive effect on public safety, we would be supporting it, because licensed gun owners are law-abiding, productive, play by the rules citizens, and they want a safer Canada too. So it's again, the discourse around all of this is very evasive. Operates largely on rhetoric, and when we're spending billions of dollars in an effort that does not improve public safety, especially after the decade of crime and violence that we've seen under the Liberals, that's very frustrating to a lot of people.
And I wonder too, I'm guessing that the vast majority of gun owners are probably more rurally based, less so in the city. So it's a different maybe understanding of gun owners and an outlook on, gun ownership. And perhaps, people in the city tend to think, I guess, negatively about gun owners, but I mean, these are normal families. In fact, many gun owners take their kids along and they'll go shoot, skeet, whatever. They'll just, sport shooting or hunting. These are like family outing sort of thing, right? I mean, these aren't bad people.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, if I were to be so bold as to say that private firearm ownership and its relationship or lack thereof with violent crime is probably one of the least understood social or public safety issues of our time. There's so much propaganda and so much irrational dialogue around it. It's really difficult for people to understand. But I will give you one example. Since May 1st, 2020, there were thousands of models of firearms that were prohibited. All of those guns are still in our communities. They were never on the streets, by the way. But anyway, they're still in our communities. We all still have all of these guns, the AR-15s and all these scary looking guns with detachable magazines and whatever. They have been in the community for 7 years, just shy of 7 years, right? Or getting close to it. And we have yet to point to a firearm-related homicide committed with one of these newly prohibited firearms, of which I think there's 2,500 models, which probably represents about 2 million individual firearms. We haven't seen a crime perpetrated in 6.5 years with any of these firearms. In fact, longer, because we didn't have any records of that before the Prohibition. So the interesting point is, there's your evidence. It's an actual very startling case study in who's not perpetrating any of these crimes. Like, if there was a crime that was committed with one of these guns, we would know all about it, because the government would be rolling it out saying, see, this is why we ban these guns. But nothing. How is that even possible if anything that the government has said over the last 7 years was true?
And of course, I mean, it's inevitable eventually, there will be something like that hits the news where, a legally owned gun and, maybe he's a hunter or whatever. I mean, does a crime somewhere. But big picture, though, we've got to say, okay, we have X amount of money that we're going to spend on public safety. Where is it best spent, right? So, I mean, it makes more sense, right, to increase spending on border security to stop the gun smuggling coming in and spend more money on stopping gang violence, drug addiction, and so forth, rather than on law-abiding gun owners.
Well, there's a lot of things that the government could do to decrease violence. Even if you look at the situation that we're talking about, the recent shooting in Montreal, this individual left a manifesto, which was all over the political spectrum, right? It was, he was a communist, big fan of Karl Marx. Then he had some misogynist kind of stuff in there and some incel related stuff. And then lists of people that should be, the victims of violence in there. It's all over the place. And I think we should be focusing on, why are young people getting wound up so tight that they're cracking at this level? Even if you just look at the manifesto itself, you could see this person has a myriad of psychological and emotional problems. It's not even one thing. He covered everything. So if the government was truly interested in bringing our community together, or not our community, but our entire country, our population together, they wouldn't be labeling people as extremists. They wouldn't be calling them Nazis for having a different opinion. They wouldn't be labeling people with pejoratives for disagreeing with things. And then the government turns around, like let's say on immigration, they turned around and said, we made a mistake. We never should have done it at the levels that we did and the way that we did it. And we're going to change it. But before they changed that, they labeled anyone that brought those same objections as the most horrible people in our society. So the people, certainly the liberals, have a lot of responsibility in creating so much division and winding people up. And then the economy, the way they've handled the economy and national debt and whatnot, are robbing our children of a future. So a lot of people the same age as this individual know there is no hope of them owning a home or having a life that like their parents did. So these are the things that are leading to this mass social and psychological illness, along with many other things, gang activity and social moral decline and all of these things. This is where violence comes from. If they were serious, they'd be dealing with it.
I think you bring up a very good point right there. I mean, of course, this conversation is happening all over Lethbridge here because the alleged shooter, attending the University of Lethbridge. So people are, the neighbors saying too, didn't see the guy much, it's kind of more of a loner. And that's pretty typical, isn't it? That we see that, it just makes you ponder, why, right? Again, a lot of it may be mental health issues and so forth as well. Let me ask you a question on that, I guess. People likely are going to be asking, what kind of mental health checks do we have for gun ownership in Canada?
Well, the regime to get a firearms license and to hang on to it in Canada is wildly strict. So you have to take a safety course, you have to pass it. Then you have to apply. You need personal references. You need personal sign off from your spouse. If you don't have a spouse, all your conjugal partners, you get a criminal background check. There's a 28-day waiting period. Like, it is layer upon layer. Just imagine this. If there was the most virulent gun control supporter in the United States, and they made a list of everything they ever wanted, Canada has all of those things. And we've had all these things since the early 90s. So there's always been strict control. And that's why the government can't point to licensed gun owners and say, see, here's the data. In fact, they don't keep data on a lot of things because they know it would paint a different picture. So we know who's doing the crimes. We know a lot about why they're doing it. We know where guns are coming from. We know who's not we do know all this stuff. But again, gun control is a political issue. It's not a public safety issue, certainly for the liberals. So it's, and I will also say what this is doing to licensed gun owners who are the most law-abiding in society. We get a criminal record check every 24 hours electronically, every day. What it's doing to our community, the division it's creating, the anger it's creating, I'm not even sure what these people are really doing. I don't know what they're really after.
Okay. Well, you are doing something very interesting. Your organization, CCFR, you applied to the Supreme Court of Canada to challenge the federal government's gun grab. And the Supreme Court has actually said they're going to hear your case. So, I guess what happens if you win this case? What would that mean for gun owners, hunters, farmers, sport shooters, et cetera?
Well, we don't exactly know. We lost at the federal court level. We lost at the Federal Court of Appeal in a unanimous decision against us, which makes it even more rare that the Supreme Court would take our case. But we applied anyway because we had promised our supporters that we would fight all the way. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court took the case. And that's very interesting because they're interested in something here. And if I were to guess, because I don't know, we won't know till we get a decision. But the government has done all of this using order in council, which is a legal instrument that they have. It's similar to an executive order in the United States. It bypasses democracy entirely and just imposes the will of whoever's in office. And they've done this, and this is something that affects private property of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, millions of firearms, billions upon billions of dollars worth of private property. And they did it using an OIC. I think the federal government the Supreme Court is afraid of that. They're like, if we don't roll this back, every government after the Liberals basically have a precedent to say we can do anything we want with OICs. OICs were just meant for political appointments or bringing into force regulations. Like, it was never meant to do sweeping, massive societal changes like this. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting, and I'm glad they took the case.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. So, again, if you end up winning this case, it has a serious impact, I guess, and probably in a positive way, for Canadians. So we'll be watching with interest for sure. Hey, thanks so much for taking time to share your expertise with us here today, Rod.
Anytime. Thanks, Paul.
You bet. Rod Giltaca, the CEO and Executive Director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights.